Hi all. Hope you're having a good semester. Harley and I are looking forward to meeting with you next week and exploring mindfulness and negotiation. You'll find that the Blackboard page is up for our course, and on it are the readings and the videos and the other materials that we'll draw upon during the course of our time together. Note that each day we'll be meeting, there are readings, including the Monday when we'll be meeting. So please do plan accordingly so that we're able to draw upon those readings, or you're able to offer up questions that you have or comments regarding them as we go. Now, I'm taking a little bit of time for this video segment to address something in particular, and that is that there's a law review article written by Professor Riskin that brings together mindfulness and negotiation and gets into and explores so many important areas that we thought it would be very useful to have this as something that we draw upon throughout the course of our week together, for which reading it in advance of even the first day's readings is something we would like to encourage. It's the kind of article that I draw upon and have for many, many years, and each time I teach it, I read it again and I learn more from it. So it's just one of these pieces that offers so much. Now, of course, in the several days before we meet, when you hopefully will get to review it once or twice or delve into certain areas that you find most interesting, it'll just offer you that beginning, developing understanding of the subject matter, and that's going to be something that's very important because there are subtleties to mindfulness, just as there are subtleties to negotiation, and here we are sort of bringing them together. So I thought it would be helpful to give you a sense of what Professor Riskin's doing in this article, why it's important, because it's really the backbone of so much that we'll be exploring, to allow your reading of it to perhaps be a little bit more informed, maybe a little bit more interesting, and or allow you to zero in on the sections that perhaps would be of most use or interest to you. So what does he do with this article called Further Beyond Reason, Emotions, the Core Concerns, and Mindfulness and Negotiation? Why does he say further beyond reason? Because a wonderful book was written in 2005 by Roger Fisher and Daniel Shapiro, two leaders in the world of negotiation, called Beyond Reason. He's saying further beyond reason. So he's taking this one step further with mindfulness as the currency that runs through that. The subtitle of the book is Using Emotions as You Negotiate. And what Professor Riskin does is he very skillfully says, okay, so here's a technique. In the book they talk about a technique called the core concerns. Here's a technique that's very useful for being more effective in negotiation. And yet, so often we can go into the negotiation with our technique in hand, and there's a saying in the military, no good plan survives the enemy. Well, there's a saying, I guess, in negotiation, no good technique survives, a real challenging negotiation. And so he's interested in sharing how it is that mindfulness can be helpful to a negotiator who's very skilled and knowledgeable about the core concerns technique, so they can actually have greater mastery and greater capacity to deliver on it in the midst of a negotiation when, in particular, emotions are running high and in a direction that's not always so useful for the negotiation process. And so he begins by talking about the central thesis, which is emotions are so important in the negotiation process. If you are sort of carrying the current of affirming emotions and you're feeling up, etc., that can be very helpful for creativity and for staying on top of the game and for feeling connected and engaged and for really bringing about and facilitating a good negotiated settlement. But so often, as you might imagine, it's a more adversarial process, and the negotiations can turn, we could call negative. And we were careful with the word negative because all emotions have their value. They're signaling something important, but by negative, what perhaps we might mean is they're not as so useful, they don't feel so pleasant, they seem to get in the way. And so the book was written to say, negotiate emotions and managing emotions, other people's and our own, is so important to be able to be a skilled negotiator, and yet that can be so challenging because there's so many emotions and they can come out of seemingly nowhere, and we can be caught in them as well, and the whole thing can sort of spiral into a very unsatisfying and unsuccessful process for everyone. So they say, we have a technique. the technique is called the core concerns. And in it you'll learn about five of these core concerns that can be really helpful for managing and having a more effective and successful negotiation. And one of the things in class that we'll be learning is that particular technique, and we'll be learning it through this article because it's helpful. But you see, there's many techniques that you can learn to do pretty much anything in the practice of law, in the world of negotiation in life. And we can go to workshops and we can read up on it and we can learn it through, life's hard lessons, and we can have these techniques and these ways of navigating these interesting terrain at our disposal. And yet, it isn't always the case that we're able to deliver on it, and then after the fact we go, oh, I wish I had been remembered this, or I can't believe I forgot that, or what happened? So Professor Riskin's article says, you know what? Mindfulness can be very helpful. Not just to feel better and maybe to be a little bit more focused so that you're able to be a little bit more at the top of your game, but much more than that. And that's part of this integration of mindfulness into negotiation and negotiation into mindfulness that we're interested in exploring with you. So you'll find that in the article he writes about what the core concern process is, how it works, so that's interesting. You'll find it actually to be immediately available to you in the next conversation that you have with a person that might otherwise not go as well as either of you would have liked. He then explains what are some of the obstacles to delivering on the core concerns. Then he zeroes in and he says, well, here's a solution, mindfulness. And in it, he gives you a very keen understanding of what mindfulness is and ways of practicing mindfulness and the value of practicing mindfulness. Now notice how I said what mindfulness is and ways of practicing mindfulness. And in class we'll talk about the difference between mindfulness and mindfulness practices. And he gets into that in the piece as well. Then he says, okay, now that we understand a little bit more about what mindfulness is and we understand how some of these mindfulness practices can be deployed, now let's explore how it is that this thing called mindfulness can be helpful for working with the obstacles to the core concerns that can then allow us to be more effective in delivering on the promise that the core concerns and or any technique offers us. So this particular law review article does a wonderful job sharing with you what mindfulness is, telling you a very interesting mindfulness negotiation technique, talking about how mindfulness and the negotiation process can really inform and enhance and optimize each other. And this is fundamental to much of what we'll be exploring, because we'll be exploring some other techniques, we'll be exploring what it is to listen mindfully, we'll explore some other avenues and the ways that we can address the subject matter of our course that we hope that you will find interesting, coming from different voices and different perspectives, and then ultimately, and most importantly to us, having a meaningful and robust conversation together that's informed by the ideas that we have as we think about things and share ideas, and also informed by the readings that form the foundation upon which much of what we'll explore together flows out of. So with that, hope you have a good weekend. Looking forward to seeing you on Monday. Please call or email or text if you have any questions or we can be helpful to you prior to the first day of class or certainly as the week progresses.